So I don't know if you've already taken your quiz yet or not. If you have not already taken the quiz, then I want to caution you. You need to make sure you know all of your properties. You need to make sure that you understand how to use the distributive property. And you need to be familiar with the order of operations. All those things are things that you really need to know well before you start your quiz. That's if you haven't taken it yet. If you haven't taken it yet, I would suggest you stop this now before you get more stuff to add on, and take it now. Go ahead, study for it, take it now, and then come back to this. If you have already taken it and you think you did really bad on it, then we can talk about that later. Okay, so, because I didn't prep you as well for it as I probably should have, so, but we'll talk about that later. Text me. Section 2.5, we're actually going to do more practice, and in this one I go more into depth about the distributive property and little incidentals with the distributive property, so it might actually make the last section make more sense now that we're going through some real problems and how to do them instead of just kind of rushing through stuff, because I was hoping you already remembered it, and if you did, then this section will be really easy, so that's great. So for these, I've already got 3 problems up here. If you think you understand the distributive property pretty well, you didn't have any problems with the homework last night, then you might want to go ahead and pause it and see if you can do these well, and that'll give you a chance to kind of shortcut your way through the video. But if you did have some problems last night and you want to watch me go through these fully, then you need to watch me go through these fully, because I would rather you go ahead and get it now than struggle later on because you missed something now. Okay? So these are the 3 problems that I have up here so far. We're going to do more than 3 today, but these are the 3 that we're starting out with. Okay, so for the first one, in order for us to simplify this, since they gave us a letter and they didn't tell us what that letter equals, that means our answer should have that letter in it. Only one of each kind of letter. So since this one has X's, we should end up with an answer that has an X in it. Not more than one X, just one X. So the first thing I'm going to do, since I can't follow the order of operations on this one because I can't add those two because they're not like terms. We finally understand that. So since they're not like terms, that means that I need to go ahead and do my distribution. So that's what I'm going to do first. So that's like saying 2 times 6 plus 2 times x. And I told you on the last video that I generally don't write this step. I generally just write what the answer is, but I wanted to make sure you really got a good foundation on the distributive property before I started making shortcuts. So 2 times 6 is 12, plus 2 times x is 2x. They are not like terms, so I can't do anything more to it. And like I said, our answer is going to have to end up having an x in it because they never told us what x was. Sometimes they tell you, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's your job to find it out. We haven't gotten to those problems yet. Down here, I'm going to show my distribution this time as well. It's another one of those where we can't do what's in the parentheses, so we go to our distributive property. So that means I have -1 times x plus -1 times 3. We have to do multiplication before we do addition according to the order of operations, which gives me -1x plus -3. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes they'll give you problems and they won't write the one there. Sometimes they'll give you the exact same problem, but it'll just be a negative in front. And when there is no number there, you have to put the number there. So you put the 1 in. You don't have to worry about it so much here, but when it's behind a minus sign, that's when you kind of want to stress putting the 1 in. So now it becomes that -1 times x and that -1 times 3. Sometimes that 1 has to be put in by you. So just watch out for the negatives in front of the parentheses. I mentioned all that to get to this problem. So when I'm doing this problem, that's going to give me 2 times h plus 2 times 3, which is 2h plus 6 for that parentheses. And then over here, everybody just wants to say it's 3h plus 5, but it's not. Remember, we have that -1 there. And then everybody wants to say, oh, it's -3h plus 5, but it's not. Because the whole point of those parentheses is for us to distribute stuff. So we have to make sure we distribute it not just to the first one, but also to the second one. So that gives me a -1 times my 3h plus a -1 times my 5. -1 times 3h is -3h, like we had talked about. Plus -1 times 5. -1 times 5 is -5, so plus -5. Now that I have it to this, I could go ahead and do like terms, because we have like terms. I have a 2h in common with a -3h. That's -1h. And then I have a plus 6 and a -5, and that's a positive 1. If you write -h plus 1, that's fine. If you put the -1 there, that's fine. Either one of those is good. Same way over here, you could have just had a -x, that would have been fine. You need to make sure that you have the negative there. Signs are important. Very important. Huge difference between a -100 and a positive 100. If you don't believe me, we can say that a -100 is owing $100 and a positive 100 is having $100. There's a big difference between owing $100 and having $100. So those negatives, they really matter. Okay, so now the question is, now that we've gone over these, can you try some on your own? Example 4. And example 5. You might have to wait on example 5 and do that one with me, but I think you might be able to do example 4 on your own. So go ahead and pause the video and let's see how you do. Okay, so for example 4, the one I thought you could do on your own, in the first one, you can't do anything inside the parentheses because they're not like terms. But there is a number on the outside you can distribute. It's a 1. If I were to distribute that 1 times x just gives me x. And 1 times 5 just gives me 5. So it's the same thing as knocking off the parentheses. So I really wouldn't show any work there. Over on this side, though, it's a different matter. When I go to distribute, what number am I distributing? Some people would think it's a 3. Some people are going to say quite correctly that it is a negative 3, because you have to include the sign in front. So negative 3 times x plus negative 3 times 2. That gives me negative 3x plus 6, negative 6, or negative 3x minus 6. Either way is fine. So when I go to combine my like terms now, I have an x and a negative 3x. So that gives me negative 2x. And then I have a 5 and a negative 6, which gives me a negative 1. You can write negative 2x minus 1 or negative 2x plus negative 1. Either one of those is correct, because we talked about how plus and minus is the same thing as negative. Plus and negative is the same thing as minus. So each one of those is correct. Over there's a lot of stuff going on. They got all sorts of numbers over here. Have you noticed this? I mean, all sorts of letters. They got a single number to make your life simpler, just a whole bunch of letters. So we're going to have to distribute, because these are not like terms. They're almost like terms, but one of these has a square and that one does not. So that makes them not like terms. So when I go to distribute, something interesting happens. So when I start writing this times that, whenever you're multiplying bases, you end up adding the exponents. So if I have 2x's here and 2x's there, that makes it a total of 4x's. So that's x to the 4th. And then 1y here and 1y there makes it y squared. And 1z here and 2z's there makes it z to the 3rd. And it was positive times a negative makes it a negative. Now, I told you that when you are combining like terms, they have to stay the same. We were not combining like terms here, we're multiplying here. That's why our exponents changed. So don't get confused and think, oh, when do I do this? You have to think about what you're doing. Are you doing a multiplication? Or are you just combining like terms like we did down here? Down here, our exponents stayed the same. It's when you multiply that your exponents get added. So I multiplied this one times this one. Now I have to do this one times that one. But I saw a mistake I've made already, and you didn't remind me. My mistake was this minus in front, because I'm not multiplying this times that. There's a minus there. That's subtraction, not multiplication. You have to look at the sign in front of the parentheses to figure out what you're doing. That's why this problem was a good problem. So, since that's the case, it's not this big thing that I'm distributing. Instead, I'm distributing something much smaller. Instead, I'm distributing this little one right there that they didn't write. So now, a negative 1 times this makes a much different kind of answer. And a negative 1 times that. So that makes it x squared yz from this one. And then a negative 1 times a negative is a positive x squared yz squared. And a negative 1 times a negative makes it a positive x squared yz. That's why it fits into this section. I'm good now. We're all good. So now I need to combine like terms. So this term right here is like with that term right there. One of these plus one of those gives me two of those. Because remember, there's one in front. 1 plus 1 is 2. And remember, it has to be a like term because we're combining like terms, we're not multiplying. That's why it fit into this section. Gotta look at what they're asking you to do. They said to subtract, not to multiply. Okay, one more. Example 6. They're just trying to mess you up by putting a number behind it instead of in front of it. Go ahead and try that one. Press pause and try it. Let's see how you do. Okay, so I need to distribute my 12. Doesn't matter whether I write it in front or behind. 12 times x minus 12 times 11 plus the one that's there, 1 times x plus 1 times 13. Like I said, it's just like taking it out of the parentheses. So 12x minus 132. Hope you didn't have to pull out a calculator for it, but I'm okay if you did. Plus x plus 13. 12x plus x is 13x. Negative 132 and a positive 13. This is when I grab a calculator. 132 subtract 13 because they're different size, so that means you subtract the numbers. Should give you something like 119-ish. I'm saying it's 119. And it'll be a negative 119 because you go with the sign of the larger number. So you can write it like this, or you could write 13x plus a negative 119. Either one is correct, because remember we said minus is the same thing as plus a negative. Now, the only other thing I want to tell you, I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but we always put the letter first. We always put the letter first in our answer instead of just our number term, because it's prettier. That's the only reason. It doesn't matter technically which one goes first, but your books are always going to put it first because it's more proper. It's prettier. Doesn't mean that it's wrong if it's not. If you end up messing it up, getting it backwards on a test, that's fine. I'm not going to kill you or mark you down unless the test specifically asks for it in a specific way. And most of them don't. But it is prettier. The back of your book is always going to have it written that way because it's proper and pretty, not because it's technically correct. Okay? So, classwork. Numbers 2 through 14 even in the class exercises and in the practice exercises, numbers 8, 10, 18, 34, 38, and 42. And then for the homework, it's all from the practice exercises. Numbers 1 through 11 odd, and 21, 23, and then 29 through 37 odd. Keep in mind when you're doing your homework, number 1, make sure at the top of your homework page, just like at the top of your classwork page, I know you write the page number down for what page it's on up in the corner like I asked you to. But at the top of the page, when you're writing down your stuff, go ahead and list out what the problems are so you don't have to keep coming back and looking at another piece of paper. In the same way with the homework, go ahead and write down what problems you had to do on your homework at the top of your homework page so you know what the problems are. That'll help you when you're trying to find stuff too. So make sure you're keeping good notes. Make sure you're writing stuff down. I know your mom's already done one homework check from chapter 1. Well, she's going to have another one to do from chapter 2. So you need to stay on top of it. Make sure you keep a nice, neat notebook. It's an easy grade. And I will see you in the next section.